All right, good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me. Before we get started, I just want to say I love collaborating with Western. We have tons of good overlap. It's been really fun to have some classes come to our PSC facilities. We have some professors that serve on our advisory committees, and just overall love to see the community partnerships. So thank you for the chance to be here. With these mixed audiences, it's always really helpful to kind of get a sense of who's in the room. And so if you could offer a show of hands of if you have worked in, I actually already know the answer to one because someone already came up and talked to me, but if you've ever worked in the energy or utility industry, could you please raise your hand? Okay, great. So I know there's expertise in the room, so please go easy on me. Don't ask me too hard of questions. And then if you're a student and you're thinking about ever being in the energy or utility industry, could you please raise your hand? A couple. Okay, cool. Maybe thinking it over. All right. And then please raise your hand if you woke up this morning, turned on your light, and the first thought that went through your head was, wow, I wonder how that electricity got to me. 1, 2, there are 2. Okay. Well, that's kind of the thing that I've come to learn is I did not think at all about what it took for my lights to turn on before I worked at Puget Sound Energy. And most people don't think of us unless the lights aren't working. Maybe their bills do, and maybe the bill looks different than they expected. That's usually when PSC comes to mind. And so I really appreciate the chance to kind of have a longer conversation. There are so many pieces to this clean energy transition that we're in the midst of. We will inevitably miss a lot in these 50 minutes that we have together, but I will try to touch on as much as possible, leave some time for questions at the end, and if there's something in particular that I don't touch on that you want to discuss, I'll do my best to address it. And of course, if I don't know the answer, we can always follow up, and this might be the start of a conversation. So we'll dive right in. PSC has been in Washington as the oldest and largest utility in the state for about 150 years. We serve 1.7 million customers across 10 counties. And right now, we are in the midst of the most significant transition that we have ever attempted. It's the most significant for the company, and it's the most significant for our clean energy laws that are now both at state, within the state. So our core purpose every day is to deliver safe and reliable energy to our customers under all conditions. And I want to take note of that under all conditions because we'll talk about a particular instance that we all probably have recent memory of where that was a particular challenge. So just to kind of lay out what that looks like, of course, we're up in the north there in the beige in Whatcom County. We have a service area of 6,000 square miles. And that color coding you see on the map there, the beige means that it's electric service only. Then if you see the purple, that means it's natural gas service only. So we're what we call ourselves a dual fuel utility. We serve electricity and we serve natural gas depending on where you live. And then in that orange kind of red area, that's when we serve both natural gas and electricity. So as you can see, we have a pretty big service area that equates to 1.2 million electric customers and nearly 900,000 natural gas customers. We've got between 3,300 and 3,400 employees. There's over 100 here in Whatcom County, myself included. We also have a generation capacity of around just over 6,500 megawatts of power, and we'll talk a little bit about what that means. But basically, the generation assets that we own or operate or have long-term contracts for can generate up to 6,500 megawatts. So what does that look like in terms of actual physical, tangible things? It would be about 2,400 miles of electric distribution system or 2,900 miles of electric transmission system. So in Whatcom County, that's 1,400 miles of overhead wire. And I love to mention this part because you don't think about it because you don't see it. It's over 1,000 miles of underground cable also. Those numbers don't show this specifically, but our electric transmission system or transmission distribution, it's actually about half underground. So you don't think of it very often because you just don't see it. And then we do have 49 substations in Whatcom County as well. So again, I asked the question if you thought about what it took to turn on your lights because I never want to assume things, but I needed a little refresher on how power gets to me. So just in a very high level, we got to have a generation source to figure out how do we create those electrons and how do we get them onto wires. So we have it there at that number one, a generation source. It could be wind, it could be solar, it could be natural gas generation, it could be hydro. Once that electron is generated, it goes out on our big transmission lines at a very high voltage, and we then transport that power at a very fast speed and a very high volume to our substations, where you step down the power. So you go from a very, very high voltage to a lower voltage so that it can then go out on the distribution lines, which is number 4. Those are the wires you see all around your neighborhood, which then serve to a transformer, brings the power voltage down even lower so that it's to a level that can actually go to your house with a service line. So that service line is serving the end customer to your home or your business. You see this stuff every day and may not even realize it, because after you've been in this industry for a little while, I started looking for substations. I started trying to pick out the difference between the transmission lines and the distribution lines and figure out what was what. It's kind of a fun game if you get into it. So that's the tangible stuff, and then this is some of the intangible stuff, but it's very much creating the landscape that PSE and all the other utilities are operating in Washington State under these laws. So the first most significant law is the Clean Energy Transformation Act. And as my colleague would remind us, the laws in Washington State have changed more in the last 7 years than the previous 100. So we are totally overhauling the way things have been done, and we are rapidly changing how our company operates because of this. So in May of 2019, Governor Inslee signed the Clean Energy Transformation Act, and that essentially set forward our path at PSE for how we were going to decarbonize our electricity supply to serve all of our customers. We'll talk a little more about that in just a second. There's 4 other laws that are playing as well in this policy landscape. We have the Clean Buildings Act, the Climate Commitment Act. You may remember that one most recently, a year ago in November, if you voted, which I hope you did. It was on the ballot, and voters had the choice to decide whether or not to uphold the Climate Commitment Act or to repeal the Climate Commitment Act. And it was upheld, and it is still a law on the books. We also have the Clean Fuel Standard and the Decarbonization Bill. So what all these different bills are doing is kind of creating the sandbox that we're playing in. And there's a few different things. Starting in June, you will see on your bill, it will actually show, it'll say CCA, Climate Commitment Act, that shows the fee associated because of that policy. So that is a cap and invest policy, and we essentially, as an emitter in the state of Washington, all the other emitters in the state pay a fee into an auction at a rate that is unknown. It goes to the state, the Department of Commerce bundles all of that money and then redistributes it out for programs, and many of which are serving our communities in really exciting ways. So that is one area where policy has changed the way we operate and changed the way that dollars are flowing through our state for these clean energy initiatives. Another is the Clean Fuel Standard. We actually have a really exciting program that's going to be announced in about a month. The Transportation Emission Reduction Grant Program has partially been funded by this Clean Fuel Standard. That's a way to help electrify fleets. And so stay tuned for exciting news on how transportation electrification is going to continue. We'll talk about more of that in just a minute. And then the decarbonization bill, that is more of a tool at a policy level to help PSC and investor-owned utilities of Washington State build our planning process so that we're talking in one cohesive plan. And previously, we had about 6 different plans as a regulated utility that we would file with the Utility and the Transportation Commission. We'd talk about gas, we'd talk about electricity, and it was 6 different plans. And this decarbonization bill means now that we have one plan called the Integrated System Plan, which we will submit our first one in, I believe, July of 27. Don't worry, we'll come back to that because that's a humongous policy landscape that's very complex and has a lot of different ways of showing up. So the Clean Energy Transformation Act, the first thing that we did, so it was passed in 19, we all know what happened in 2020, and in 2025, we celebrated our first benchmark of this transition by eliminating coal entirely from our portfolio. So that's great news. 750 megawatts of total capacity that coal generated in our portfolio was removed. Now we're working toward our goals for 2030 and 2045. And of course, the end goal for 2045 is 100% clean electricity. So that means everything that we generate electricity cannot emit, have no carbon emissions. So what does that look like in reality? Well, we have to acquire an enormous amount of clean energy at an unprecedented pace and scale, and we are making progress, and it is a big job. So that roughly translates from where we were in 2023, we need to acquire about 15,000 megawatts of renewable energy. On the right of the slide, you see this is not the recipe that we are necessarily going after, but these are some ways that resources could show up. And so one thing we say at PSE is that we are technology agnostic. It's going to take an all of the above approach to be able to figure out how to have all of these clean energy sources working in sync, working to meet the need at every given moment for our customers. So you can see just kind of a metrics laid out there of the different resources, what it could take to get to that 15,000 megawatts. That big wind turbine that you see there is our new Beaver Creek wind farm, and it is in the state of Montana. And if you are wondering why it's in the state of Montana, there's a couple of reasons. One is that we used to be a partial owner in a coal generation facility there, and we no longer are. And in Colstrip, Montana. And one of the important aspects of that is we already had transmission built from Montana to deliver that energy to Washington State. And so we wanted to be able to replace that. We already said 750 megawatts of coal now is offline. We want to replace that resource with this renewable clean wind energy, and now we can transport it on that transmission that we already had coming to Washington. So we are making significant progress. We've had 6,000 megawatts of renewable energy resources come online since 2019. That's a lot. It's more than we've had in the history of our company. But as you saw, we still have more than double that to achieve in the next 20 years. So one way that we are aggressively pursuing this, and I like that it's bolded because it does feel like that every day. We are aggressively pursuing this. I put just a screenshot from our website about acquiring energy because we have numerous RFPs, requests for proposals, that have been issued, and we are asking developers of energy to tell us where they think they can have projects, whether it is wind, solar. It doesn't matter the resource. If you want to really get into the weeds, every single one of those blue lists there under current RFPs is a link, and it has all of the explanation of what it's going to entail to submit to our process. We'll be looking for things that are commercially viable, so technology that is proven and known to generate energy, and things that are economically cost effective, because all of this is going to cost an enormous amount of money. When we talk about this clean energy transition, we are talking in billions, not in millions. And that is showing up in our rates, and we are very aware of that. So I'll talk more about that as we move along too. So we also have this kind of challenge here with renewable energy where we need on-demand clean energy resources to replace the carbon-emitting ones. And we have what we call base load. What is providing our base of energy that is going to keep us functioning, and can we turn it on quickly? So we call that a dispatchable resource. So an example of that would be hydro, maybe. You could let some water out of the dam, get the turbines spinning, and it's going to generate energy, right? That's dispatchable. But there are times when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine, and right now we do not have storage of those, like through batteries, that is to the scale that we need to be able to dispatch that renewable resource when the sun is not shining and the wind is not blowing. So that's essentially what we are solving for largely right now. There are some very interesting concepts. There's, of course, nuclear, there's geothermal, there's lots of ways in which we can generate energy. And the question becomes, is it commercially viable for us in the time that we need to be able to build this mix that we have to serve our customers every day? So let's take a look at what that mix entails. In November last year, 25, we look back at the year before, so this is our most recent. We look at 24 and we say, what made up our electricity fuel supply? Well, as you can see, we still had coal in the portfolio, so that was 18% of our overall portfolio. Solar, less than 1%. Nuclear, less than 1%. Unspecified might mean that we went to a power purchase agreement, or we had to go to the market. We don't have specifics on what resource that was. Natural gas, you can see, 32% is a pretty significant portion of our fuel mix in 24, as is hydro. Wind, I'm excited because I put these back to back, but in 22, we had 16% of wind. In 24, we had 20. So we're making some progress there. Hydro pretty much stayed the same. It went from 27 in 2022 to 28. And you'll see natural gas was 23%. Coal was 23% as well in 22. So those numbers look different as coal diminished and natural gas rose a bit. And so in 2026, it will be interesting to see how this looks, right? Because coal is going to be gone. And hydro right now, we have a low snowpack, and that is making us a little bit nervous. We don't like that. It means we have to be planning accordingly because our hydro resources are going to look a little bit different this year, and we have to be prepared for that. So this is why I say we're technology agnostic. Whatever it is that's going to be the resource that can help us cleanly and renewably build that 100% for our customers by 2045 is our goal. So again, I mentioned that decarbonization bill. It was House Bill 1589 a couple sessions ago. That allows us to build this big one integrated system plan, streamlines our process with the regulator, but it is still a very lengthy endeavor. We are trying to be as transparent with our customers as possible, which is why I really appreciate opportunities to come and talk about the details here at things like this. And what we find right now is that basically when our demand spikes, we have to plan to serve our customers on the hottest hot day and the coldest cold day. And right now, natural gas is essentially what is helping us keep lights and heat on when we've removed that coal generation and when we're pursuing all of these other renewable generation resources. So one kind of case study that we point to a couple years ago, you might remember we had this kind of prolonged cold snap that happened over the MLK Junior weekend. And it was about 5 days where it was sub-zero temperatures, and we actually set a record on both our gas and our electric systems for demand during that period. It was pretty intense. We relied on all of our generation assets to make sure that we could meet the electricity and heating demands of our customers, and we did successfully. But one thing you'll notice about that map, the color-coded temperature map of the nation, is that it wasn't just us that was cold. It was a huge area, including some of the regional transmission and energy partners that we have. So it wasn't just PSC and PSC customers needing all of this energy. It was a huge regional area. And of course, if we look at basic economics for supply and demand, we know that then the price goes up when all of that demand from all those customers regionally happens. So we actually looked at what created our energy supply during that time. Coal was 17%. Natural gas was about 40%. Hydro was 14%, which is about what you would expect for output during a January time like that. And wind was 7%. And so that map, you can see when we talk about base load, those first two colors of coal that's orange at the bottom and then gas that's yellow, those are kind of what we would refer to as base load, because the rest, as you start to move forward, it starts to have these fluctuations. And so you can see that blue, that hydro, started off kind of slow, then it crept up a little bit. But that's because wind was more producing and then it tapered off. And then the black is other PPAs, and that means power purchase agreements. So that is contracts that we have for other entities that are generating power that we would purchase that power from, that are already determined contracts. But then the red is the open regional energy market. And when you have to go to the open market, that is can be extremely expensive. And so this event for PSE was one of the most expensive events we had in all of 2024, but really with new peaks at this period for both electricity and gas, it was extremely expensive just historically for us as a company. So we look to this because, we have to plan for the hottest hot day and the coldest cold day, because that's when our customers are going to need our energy at the highest volumes. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about kind of what is locally here in Whatcom County. Many of you, I know some classes have come down to Incogen. I was just there a couple weeks ago on a tour with some folks. Again, great crew that runs this facility. So this is kind of originally built when the Georgia Pacific Mill site was on the waterfront. And it generates 165 megawatts of power, so that's about enough to power 120,000 households, a little more than Bellingham. There's 4 generators in there. 3 of them are gas turbines, and 1 of them is a steam turbine. So we call that a combined cycle or a combustion turbine. It means we have 2 different types of turbines in there. This allows us to recover some of the waste heat and that comes from that process and get used again. And again, I've kind of mentioned that this is considered a dispatchable power source. So the guys at Incogen, there's 2 people at least always on site year-round, 24/7, 365. They have a call every single morning with the generation team to figure out if they're going to run that day or the next day, so they can be planning. And that's looking at the entire fuel mix of our generation assets and where we think we're going to be getting our power from. So if you see a large steam cloud on the waterfront, I've been asked many times what that is, if it's smoke, and it is actually steam. One of the cool parts about that is we currently have a new way to harness that steam. So many of you may be familiar with the district energy system that is now getting built out at the waterfront as it's being redeveloped. This is in partnership with Corex, which is a utility. And if you look at that picture there and see that blue pipe off to the right of that little black container, that blue pipe actually runs back to our it's our cooling towers, and that the heat that is considered waste heat that's already been generated is now going into that blue pipe, going into that Corex facility, and they have built a system with far more enhanced engineering. I'm sure a couple people could explain it. I cannot. I've seen it, and it's very cool. They take that into their piping system, and now they are piping heat into the buildings that are connected up to that system in the waterfront district. So there is a Millworks, which is a Mercy housing building, and they actually receive their heating from that system, which is pretty cool. One of the things that does is it's obviously a low carbon energy source for that building, and it means that building doesn't have to have their own HVAC, all of the equipment that would go along with it. They obviously have to have the delivery system, but not necessarily the generation to pull it in. So they actually get more room from their building, which is pretty cool, I was able to learn. So we are looking at all of the ways that old generating resources like Incogen can turn into new uses like this. So this is an incredibly, I think everyone's proud of this. The port's proud, Corex is proud, we're proud, UMC helped build it. And everyone just looks to this as, the beginning of a lot more potential for ideas like this. The last one, if you've ever been up Highway 20 in Skagit County near the town of Concrete, we have the Baker River Hydroelectric Project. Has anyone been up to Baker Lake before? Yeah, or Lake Shannon. So those are dams that are lakes that are created from our hydroelectric project. They are not, if you go further up Highway 20, you'll get to Nehalem. There are dams there as well. That is Seattle City Light. And so those dams are operated and providing power to the city of Seattle. But we have Upper Baker Dam, Lower Baker Dam, and one of the things that two kind of highlights, we had a record-breaking sockeye salmon return at Baker Lake this year. We are incredibly proud of this. Over 91,000 sockeye salmon returned. If you look at the numbers from the 80s, it was dwindling. It was almost an extinct run. And so we are very proud of working with our fisheries biologists, some of whom came from institutions like BTC. They have a fisheries program that we do internships and hire out of. And if you want to go up there, we do have tours in the summer. So please let me know if that's of interest. It is incredibly cool to see both the technology and the science all culminating for the success of having these sockeye return. And then also in the town, just off the main drag there in concrete, is our Baker River Clubhouse. I would just highlight this because please stop in there. It's open May through September to the public, 20 minutes there, and you'd get a whole rundown of the history of this area, or the history of this facility. We redid this building 3 or 4 years ago as part of our license with FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. We have to go and renew our dam licenses after a certain amount of years, and this was part of that renewal process. It also has great bathrooms if you're on the road and need to take a pit stop. So do stop in, and this is really where, you know, when we were looking back at that pie chart about where our hydro, what percentage of hydro, it's this facility and our Snoqualmie Falls facility. Those are the only two hydro generations that PSE owns. So just to kind of talk about, you know, how are customers going to be part of this clean energy transition, right? And we see customers as a pivotal partner in making any of this happen. Your choices totally impact how we operate. And so a few different ways we'll talk about distributed energy resources. That means solar, obviously you can see in that photo on top of a building. Might mean microgrids, which would possibly be a battery connected to a generating source like solar to power a smaller set of customers. Demand response, that's essentially when is it that you need the power. You're demanding it, and you can, we can work with you on when to use that power at certain times. And then of course there's, and I'm going to talk about those in more depth, and then of course there's transportation electrification. So many of you probably have an EV or have ridden in one, and we have lots of kind of supporting charging and other infrastructure to help that transition continue as well. So distributed energy resources, your adoption of these, whether it's rooftop solar panels, batteries, smart appliances, that adoption is growing rapidly. And so what that does is if you have an ability to generate power from one of those resources that is not like Incogen or not like that hydro facility, right? We call it, it's distributed, and I see your Ecotech shirt over there, so I know you know what I'm talking about. But basically, we see this as a critical part of how we then overall orchestrate power needs and delivery of that power. So there's a slide in just a minute that kind of shows the big picture of all this, but this one there on the building is a community solar array. So if you live in an apartment or you are not able to install solar on a place that you might have ownership of, we will help get these installed. We actually have one right now that just went in on our Bellingham Service Center, which is right across from Stemma Brewing, right off I-5. We have a huge solar array, and our customers are able to essentially lease a share of that solar array. So you don't have to buy it and own it, but you can lease a share of it, and that's meant to be your portion of solar that you are contributing to. So we have a multitude of products. In fact, so many that they change a lot, and I try to keep up, but we have a whole team that keeps up with them. So if you have specific product questions and are just trying to figure out what your options are, we have some really good resources, one of which is an energy advisor. And if anyone would like my card, it has the energy advisor's phone number on the back, and it's a great opportunity to kind of take control of what your energy use and what your options look like. So demand response, you could think of this as conservation or energy efficiency. We see demand response as being an incredibly important aspect of how we get all of this done. Again, the hottest hot day and the coldest cold day, there may be an opportunity where right now is not super cold. Let's see, a couple days ago it was sub-zero, right? And we are watching the temperatures and we're like, oh, we think between 5 p.m. and 8 p.m., right, what happens? It's 5 right now. Everyone's going to go home, turn on all their lights, get dinner started, turn on the TV, and all of a sudden the demand is about to go up. So we've said to people our customers on certain days, if you go home and actually don't need that TV to be on, or you aren't going to be in the room, and maybe you're able to not use that power, we would appreciate that, and we can even incentivize certain devices. Like if you have a smart thermostat and you want to sign up for us to be able to interact with that thermostat, we can do that. That's completely voluntary. So all of this is voluntary. But what it does is it may not seem like that big of a deal if you keep a light off or if you turn the TV off from the other room that you're not in. But if 10,000 households all do that, you start to see some pretty significant change. And what that looks like, this was a summer event, and on August 8th, a year and a half ago, it was pretty warm. And so we just sent a note out to customers and said, hey, consider maybe your fan could turn off, like maybe you're going to leave the house, you're going to sit in the yard. Just consider lowering your usage. And we actually saw a reduction of 65 megawatts just by asking. And so this told us that it really can work. Voluntary action can actually take the demand of that peak and kind of curb it. And if we then have 65 megawatts that we've saved, and that means we don't have to go get Incogen running, that's a big deal. That means we didn't have to generate that power, we didn't have to charge customers. And we want to be able to keep that as low as possible. So what does this look like, big picture? Well, it could look like this, and it might one day. This we kind of refer to as this big energy orchestration, right? We've got big utility scale resources like those renewables, like those solar panels that you see down in the corner. You might have hydropower. You might have big renewable microgrids where they're connected to batteries and they're kind of serving little subsections of customers. You might have industrial customers that have integrated, and so we're working with all of these levels to then try to build these options. The residential home, it might have an EV. It might have a charger that charges the battery, but at night, it could be that it pulls energy back from the battery. I actually got to see one of the first demonstrations we have of this. It's called Vehicle to Grid, V2G, and it's taking the power from an electric school bus. And of course, school buses have a route that they know, right? They pick up the same kids in the same corner at the same time, very predictably. When they all go back to the bus barn, those batteries can actually be a resource of power and go back onto the grid. And so we have two examples of that now. One's in Olympia, one's in Snoqualmie. Those are the kinds of things when we talk about this energy orchestration, where are all these different resources going to be throughout our communities that can start to serve the need that then mean maybe we're not building more. We have to transition it currently to all renewables, but we may be able to start using these in a more orchestrated fashion to serve the customer need. So, and there's a whole team that talks about this super in-depth and in very cool technological ways that, I think the adoption rates will continue, but we're kind of just at the beginning of all of this. So I do want to mention that, again, we recognize this costs an enormous amount of money. And rates have changed. So I'll just be very upfront about that. We are very aware of that. Rates have changed, and they're going to continue to change. So one of the things that we've invested in is assistance programs. We've had them for decades. We have continued to build them to be lower barrier. We hear from our customers. We have several advisory committees, and we continue to build the programs to meet the need. So one of those is a bill discount rate. We also just launched a program that is past due bills and balances. It's a forgiveness program. You have to qualify for it. You have to work with our team on it, but it forgives past due balances. So we really are trying to figure out the ways to meet our customers in as many forms as possible. Community partnerships, which is where I spend a lot of my time, that's really what's most successful for implementation. So we have dozens of community partners throughout our counties. Opportunity Council is an incredible partner here, among many others. And so I just wanted to leave before we move into some questions. I just wanted to say that if anyone in this room knows of a way that we can better get our bill assistance programs out, we have a multitude of options, and we would love to connect you to them. And so whether it's understanding your energy use, whether there's a program that you qualify for that we don't know about yet, you have the chance to learn about it. We want to be able to provide that resource. So We could talk about so many things that I didn't have a chance to touch on. We could talk about wildfire risk mitigation. We could talk about batteries. We could talk about storm restoration. So I'm open to, I think we have 15 minutes or so. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I know, it's not something you really think about a lot. Yeah.
I have a couple of questions. With the active volcanic Cascade Mountains right in our backyard, is Washington State looking to Iceland or other areas that are very active in geothermal to convert that subterranean heat into energy that can be used?
Yeah, great question. I've been told to repeat the question for people online. So the question in summary is Washington looking to geothermal as a resource since we have obviously active volcanic Cascade Range very nearby? The answer is yes. So there's kind of two recent headlines that I would point to. One actually was in Cascadia Daily News. The Whatcom Purdy and the Nooksack tribe have actually signed an MOU. They're working on kind of some geothermal exploration to see. I don't really know what their plans are since I'm not associated with either entity, but they've announced that partnership. And then Washington Commerce, it's got to be Commerce. There's a grant out currently to try to figure out how to harness those resources. Mount Baker is known as a geothermal kind of hot spot, not just obviously because of the volcano, but in terms of like actual production potential. So I think the answer is yes. It's nascent, but yes.
My other question is the transition and the vision is very encouraging. My question is around affordability for the customer. I would assume that different types of generation, wind, solar, hydro, gas, have different costs per kilowatt. And how are we making affordability a priority, not just the transition away from greenhouse gases?
Yeah, I would say you've pretty much hit the hot topic right now, is how do we do that? That is, I don't know how many discussions daily occur, both at the company and I think just statewide, about that exact answer. There's a couple pieces to it. One, there's things like Incogen, which is, built in the 90s, is operating, and there's a question of like, is it economical to keep it going? And maybe it is the most economic choice for us to do operations and maintenance in consistency to keep that functioning as a reliable resource. Then there's, and it's all contextual, right? So I'm not going to try to say numbers because it won't apply or it won't, fit sort of a theoretical here. But there's also, you hear a lot about like, costs of wind and solar are coming down. Accurate. However, the volume of investment that we have to make in this capital, it is steel in the ground, it is infrastructure and physical changes, that is costing an enormous amount of money. And so once those resources are built and we can generate from them, the costs will look different. Right now, it's an enormous upfront investment. So like Beaver Creek Wind Farm, the Montana wind farm that I had a photo of, that was just shy of like $500 million. Behind Ginny and then Ginny.
I said a quick note about the geothermal resources actually. The Washington State Ecology Department is surveying 3 sites in Washington. They just held a community findings event at Walker Community College like last week. And there'll be another one in the fall to look at developing Mount Baker for geothermal. So you can look at Washington State's Ecology Department's geothermal. They're doing some stuff there.
Cool. Thank you for mentioning that.
My question for you was actually on some of the bottlenecks to meet the affordability and the clean commitment in terms of what kind of policies. Obviously, there's policies that require you to meet these requirements, but then there's other things about permitting or maybe transmission lines, getting this power from other places. So I wonder if you could touch on some of like the bigger maybe policy things that could help goals.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, in summary for those online, the question is around policy reform or that's sort of my answer actually. Right, just sort of what the bottlenecks may be to getting this accomplished. So kind of gave away my answer, but permitting is a significant component of what we are navigating. Part of that is because if you think about a transmission line that runs across counties, across public-private property, maybe it goes through your U.S. Forest Service, maybe it goes through DNR land, there's permitting processes at every step of the way. At a national level, this conversation has come up just in terms of federal reform. Nationally, if we're talking about even just modernizing the grid, and I know that many conversations at a federal level have been had, and I think there's a deep desire for reform. But even, I would point to Skagit County, they're working on a clean energy siting process at a county level. There's state levels, so we have pretty much city, county, state, jurisdictional, tribal processes to go through. And, you know, we might announce a project and hope that it's going to get done in like 3 to 5 years, and sometimes it takes 7 to 9. We hope. Yeah. Oh, wait, Jenny, you had one. Sorry, I'll come back to you.
I just wanted to dig into conservation a little bit more because, I mean, I've bought and sold several houses in this state, and it's always been shocked at how miserably insulated they are. We don't do storm doors, we don't do storm windows.
Yeah.
And I know you have incentive programs. I've taken advantage of those.
Great.
But could you, like, speak to the, like, is there a way to quantify what could be gained, and shouldn't it deserve a space in your pie chart?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, that pie chart is for energy. So the question is about conservation and basically better conservation efforts. So 2 things on that. One is the pie chart is really our fuel mix, not necessarily like our need or our, yeah.
Since you're actually investing in it.
Yeah, absolutely. And even like the center lower one is the home weatherization assistance program. That is huge. And you know, the weatherization team would probably be very mad that I don't know the number of potential savings there. So I could definitely get back to you, but I'm sure that they have quantified it, right, to show what the impact of their programs are. But yes, so we partner with, well, I mean, there's weatherization programs, I think even from the Institute of Energy Studies, if I'm not mistaken, energy audits of sort. So there's energy audits, there's some weatherization through Opportunity Council, there's a whole bunch of mix and match programs, but yes, I mean, that is, like, my house is a great example, 1910, no insulation. So yeah, there's a huge amount of efficiency to be gained there. Did I answer it? I just agreed with you.
Yeah, there's a lot to be gained.
Yeah.
It'd be great to quantify that
And
as an illustration,
yeah.
I think.
I agree. We may have, and I will. If we do, I will find it. Yeah.
So when you brought up Baker Lake, you brought up a record for like a recent like resurgence in fish.
Yeah.
Can you explain what that was and what the previous record was, and like how long the decline was and what it means?
I can touch on some of that. I'll do my best. We have a hatchery there, and we have several fish biologists on staff. And so essentially, I want to say it was like 1983, the sockeye salmon population was below 100. It was nearly gone. And so we, as part of our agreement to run that facility, built and invested significantly in this, basically best practices for hatchery and fish management. And we've seen the returns continue to grow year over year. So that is the story thus far. And we do, it's actually a pretty cool, I wouldn't even say co-management agreement because there's multiple managers of that fishery, including the tribes. And there's, if you Google sockeye salmon return Baker Lake tribal fishery, they actually have tribal fishing rights to go out first and go fish. And it's a pretty cool story. Seattle Times did a pretty extensive article on it this summer. Yeah, thanks.
I was wondering if you're doing any partnerships or plan to do any work with like building construction to minimize
Yeah.
energy saving stuff, water usage limitations, or even just like the construction of the building itself?
Yeah, great question. Back at the beginning, and I didn't really talk about this, so you're calling me out on that. This Clean Buildings Act, the one in the top center, that passed a whole new set of building standards and there are also various building codes at different jurisdictional levels, but this is the state law. I can speak just a little bit about it, but essentially buildings that are over 50,000 square feet, and now there's a new kind of rolling implementation of buildings that are around like 20 or 25,000 square feet. So we actually have a whole program and a team at PSC called the Clean Building Accelerator, and they will work with like large commercial customers that have those size of buildings to be able to ensure that they're meeting those standards and having the most efficient systems in place. But it's a whole component and section of the company that's working on that with our customers.
What about extending it to like a housing, like for just like a single family home?
Yeah, I would probably say that fits more with what Ginny was talking about around like weatherization, or I mean that would be for current existing buildings. And then for current construction, that's kind of where it gets more down at like the jurisdictional level of whether there's like building codes within, I mean the building codes world is like a whole different can of worms or, opportunity to kind of dig into, but I know some, but not a huge amount, but yes, the building codes are very much integrated into this energy efficiency pathway as well, and decarbonization.
Yeah, a question from online, also a reminder to repeat.
So sorry.
The questions, sorry. We have someone asking, are you working to store carbon emissions? Also, is there a commitment to universal cells on all buildings or solar?
Okay, and the question is, are we working to store carbon? We, PSC, I do not believe that is part of our overall mix here. One thing that I would note about us as a utility that makes us a little bit different than some like developers or maybe research and development type companies is that we have very minimal dollars to go and invest in things that are not already proven commercially viable technologies. We need to be certain that a technology is going to work to generate power to get to our customers. So we can make some modest commitments here and there for things like small modular reactors, or saying like we are invested in the outcome of what these emerging technologies may have, but we ourselves as a utility have ratepayers to support the functionality, and we cannot spend those dollars on what is unknown. We have to spend it on what is known to ensure that our customer is going to get the delivery of the product. And then what was the second part?
Is there a commitment to universal cells on all buildings?
I don't even know if I know what that is. 4 cells. I'm not sure. I'm going to say no because I'm not sure what that is.
I think we have time for one more brief question.
Yeah.
I have a question about getting energy from Montana.
Correct.
Is that pretty common for Montana's pretty far away?
It is. Yeah, totally.
Is that pretty common in an energy system to get energy coming from places that far away?
Sometimes, yes. I should include a slide that shows kind of the regional core. Actually, I may have one. Oh dear, look what I've done. Right at the end too. I think I have one slide here at the very end. Oh, I didn't include it. I'm so sorry. Sometimes I include an appendix that basically the answer I would say is yes, but not always that distance. And we are regionally drawing power from wherever the generation is. And that is true no matter what utility is serving you. It's a gigantic system. So if you have the chance to read systems thinking or take a class on systems thinking, do it.
Okay, so that we're out of time here, but I'm sure Liz is happy to stay down here.
Thank you, everyone.